Hello everyone, it's Fine and Steady, and this might seem a little bit off-brand because we won't be talking about crypto in this one. We're going to be talking about Biden's $4 trillion stimulus infrastructure plan that he's going to try to get passed by the US government. And this is really important because it's going to show you guys what the US government is planning to do over the next coming 8 years if he gets reelected, to give you an idea of, hey, the government is pushing this way. There's going to be a lot of money flowing into those sectors. Maybe I should be basing my investment choices on that, or at least definitely be influenced by this influx of cash towards those sectors. So this is going to be a long one. Stay with me. I'm going to try to speed run it. Let's get right into it. All right, guys, at the very bottom, we're going to talk about the politics, but let's just speed run through all of the content that we have to get through. So this is going to be a $3 to $4 trillion infrastructure stimulus plan. $2 trillion of this is marked for climate initiatives, and the rest is marked for infrastructure and other priorities, which we'll get into. So let's start with social infrastructure. This falls under other priorities. So they would like to extend the child tax credit for several years because this expires at the end of this year, but it's coming out to be approximately $250 to $300 US per month that you can write off from your taxes if you have a child. They're also planning on spending a significant amount into school infrastructure, specifically $100 billion into schools and education. They want universal pre-kindergarten. That's for kids below the ages of, I believe, 4 to 5, so like the really the smallest kids. They want free community college, and they're going to have more subsidies under the Affordable Care Act. They also want to pour a bunch of money into underserved schools and communities. That means free or reduced tuition at colleges and universities, which have a historically black majority, right? So just usually these communities unfortunately do end up being a little bit underprivileged. Well, they also want to directly make money available for black and brown communities. This means money for infrastructure, to pay the government workers, or for investments into these communities. They also want to focus on communities which are affected by pollution. So this can be, I don't know, guys who have had huge oil spills, or people who are working close to mines or other hazardous industries, or places with huge air pollution as well. That's big today. And as well, they want to have money on the sidelines for racial justice crises. They as well want to train millions for new jobs. So that's going to be more or less the social part of this plan, how he wants to invest in the actual people and social aspects. Next, well, let's move on to the climate. So in this section, they want to pour approximately $2 trillion. They want to reduce carbon emissions without having a carbon tax. That's very important because that means that they are going to most likely just actually invest in companies that are reducing carbon emissions, invest in infrastructure which is reducing carbon emissions. So if they're not going with the carbon tax route, well, then that's the only other route available. They want to have 1 million affordable housing units. They would like to update the building codes to make sure that all new housing built is actually energy efficient. And they want to pour $100 billion into expanding the EV station network of the United States of America. Well, that's a lot, and we're going to get into more detail here at the bottom of the infrastructure plan. There's some overlap between these two. Anyway, let's move on to infrastructure. So they plan to put a bunch of money into the electric grid, mostly to avoid any kind of Texas freeze issues from happening again. It means that they're going to build more power lines with a focus on power lines that specialize in carrying renewable energy. They want to permanently seal, so this is called capping, oil and gas wells. They want to reclaim abandoned mines and make these active again. They're going to put money into roads, bridges, waterways, rails. Charging stations, again, is appearing here in their bill. They want to offer what's called cash for clunkers, which is a funny name, but it's basically just a subsidy to buy a new car if you have a very old car. They want to put $400 billion into this climate infrastructure specifically. So remember, under climate, there's more than just infrastructure, but specifically they want to allocate $400 billion just to infrastructure. So $60 billion for green transit. That means road infrastructure or vehicles infrastructures. This could be biofuels. Maybe they want to make a bunch of green buses, tunnels, stuff like that. But what's interesting is they also want to directly invest $46 billion for climate-related research. That's a huge amount of money. They're also planning on investing hundreds of billions into high-growth industries, right? Well, this would probably push forward advanced battery manufacturing, which I believe is going to be the next revolution in the world when we actually have graphene batteries coming out in this infrastructure. There's a little bit of overlap, like I said before. Well, what's also mentioned is EV charging stations, which was $100 billion. Then, more specifically, they mentioned $200 billion for housing infrastructure, which would be between these two. They also want to put $100 billion in low-income housing, again here, and they want to retrofit houses with better energy-efficient solutions. And then what's new is they also want to put money into 5G infrastructure, and they want to bring broadband to rural areas. This just means internet for rural areas, which, you know, is always a big topic. So let's move on to taxes, which is the last section here. Guys, stay with me, please. We're almost at the end. Thank you guys so much for watching to this point. If you would please smash up the like button, I would appreciate it immensely. So let's move on to the taxes. Well, they're probably going to increase the corporate tax rate from 21% to 28%. They're going to tax wealthy investors. However, it seems that they do not want to go the route of a wealth tax, which I think is a very good idea, that they don't want to pursue that. For many reasons, but that's enough content for a separate video. What they will do most likely is to increase the income tax rate at the top income bracket from 37% to 39.6%. This would affect individual people earning $500,000 or couples earning $600,000, and they might drop this tax bracket down to $400,000. Additionally, they promise that they're not going to increase taxes on anyone earning below $400,000. They plan on extending some business tax breaks that were given in 2017, and a really, really big one, which is why drug prices in Europe and a lot of other developed countries are so low compared to drug prices in America, which can be absolutely astronomical. Well, they're finally going to allow Medicare to negotiate with these pharmaceutical companies and negotiate the costs. It means that finally you're going to have the government coming in the US and saying, hey guys, we're going to give you this amount of money for this drug, and that's it. Accept it, take it, or leave it. And that's kind of how the negotiations work within Europe in most countries, and that leads to actually pretty affordable healthcare for most Europeans, which would be great for the US, and that's one step in the good direction to actually fix the whole healthcare crisis of the US. This is actually a really big one, because if you look at the share of income of a person and how much they spent on healthcare, like I don't know. If you compare it over the past 30 years or something like that, I can bring up the study for you. You can see here just a quick data point that US healthcare spending as a percentage of GDP has grown 4.6% in 2019, reaching 3.8 trillion of GDP, or approximately $12,000 per person is what the average is spending on healthcare. That's absolutely crazy, and it makes up 17.7% of the GDP. And if we look at the trend, you'll see that this number as a percentage of GDP has been growing like crazy. And if we look then at how much the percentage expenditure of the US as GDP has grown since 1960, we see that here it was about 5% of the US GDP was spent on healthcare. Well, if we go all the way up to 2005, it had ballooned all the way to 16.1%, which is huge, because remember, the GDP of the US has also grown astronomically as a percentage of like per person too. So this number is actually, if you were to think about the impact that it has on people, it's not just a 3 times higher impact, it's actually more than that. The nice thing is that it does seem to have leveled off in recent years, which is actually really nice, and it means that some of the policies that they're coming out with are starting to have an impact. But guys, if you compare this 18% projected for 2020 to other countries in the world, let me give you a couple of them. We look here at data from the World Bank. Let's go, for example, to the United Kingdom and Germany. So let's check Germany first. You see here Germany spends only 11.5% of their GDP instead of the US, who spends 18. We see Japan here spends just under 11% as opposed to the US's 18. We see here that Poland spends about 6.5% of their GDP as opposed to the US's 18. And let me just scroll a little bit slower here and look at how many countries have double digits. Well, Sierra Leone, all right. And if we keep going, no double digits. Sweden, 11%. Switzerland, 12%. And finally, we get here to the US, which in 2018 was 17%. Guys, it's pretty much double what other developed countries are spending on their healthcare, and that's only because they don't have the same negotiating power. So this point here in the stimulus plan is actually extremely important and probably bad news for the pharmaceutical companies in the US, but I do think they're going to be fine. Just you might not see as much growth as you have seen in the past couple of decades. I don't think you have to worry about pharma. I don't think this is really going to have a huge impact on their business, but it is going to have a huge impact on the citizens' medical costs, which is going to be great. So let's talk about the politics of this. Well, this is currently a first draft, and the Republicans are not going to like the tax hikes nor how much money is going to be spent on green energy and renewables and stuff like that. They don't see it. And as well, if you want to close gas wells, well, guys, the Republicans really aren't going to like that, and they are going to push back. Now, there's a couple of things that Biden can do. He can try to get the 60 votes he needs, which most likely won't happen on time. He's going to try a budget reconciliation maneuver, and well, on March 31st, we're going to see what's happening here, and they're actually going to give us the draft of the bill. What's been said so far has just been stuff that's been reported. I don't think we actually have a bill in front of us yet. And in April and May, the negotiation phase is going to go on, and for sure the Republicans are going to demand changes. So I would see a lot of this get reduced down, and most likely we're going to see this bill pass in late May, and Biden says this plan will create about 5 million new jobs. I'm going to stop the video there. Thank you guys so much for watching. It's a pretty long one. If you stayed until the end and you got smarter with me, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Thank you so much for watching. If you know all of this information, well, you are now going to be a better investor than when you started this video. Thank you guys for watching. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.